Hey guys, I'm back for day 3. I'm going to be posting this tomorrow on Wednesday. Listen, I'm going to take it easy on you today. This will be pretty short, but I also want to explain. I found a link to the movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and the plot is a senator. This is fiction, okay? A senator dies from this western state, and there's only a couple months left on his term. And the governor gets pressured by his kids. Now, he's getting pressured from everybody to appoint the right person. And his children actually talk him into like picking this Boy Scout leader named Mr. Smith. And he is going to get chosen. He's going to go to Washington. And it's really one of the best political movies in American history. Now, it was made in 1939. It is black and white, but guys, trust me, you will like the movie. There are a couple dry points, and it's kind of corny because it was made in 1939. But I really want you to watch this. So after today's lecture, I'm not posting anything again until Monday. And you guys have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to find about 2 hours to watch this movie. And then I'd really like to get your input on that. And then we'll finish up, how a bill becomes a law next week. And, maybe by next Friday I'll put together a test. I did a test for my honors history and government. One ended up being 23 points, the other one 25. So I'm not going to bust your chops. You're going to have the notes to use and stuff like that. So I really don't want to burden you guys with a ton of work and that sort of stuff, but I do want to expose you to this. And you guys, again, I haven't graded all the questions from the second lecture, but again, you guys are asking some great questions. And Lori just showed me that, or she responded that you guys can see those comments. So I'll keep doing that, and it's kind of fun for me, anyways. So I hope this is going well, and I'll get your comments, how you feel about how this class is going and so forth as we move forward. So on here, guys, you got your Senate leadership. So you can see the Republicans are all in the positions of power of majority, and the Democrats are the minority, okay? These are people that you will hear about: Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, especially all of you have heard of Nancy Pelosi here in the House. Okay, and here's the number of seats that each hold and so forth, okay? So the next thing we're going to talk about, guys, in a 2-year period, which is a Congress, so this is the 116th. After November of 2020, we'll get the 117th Congress. About 10,000 bills are introduced into Congress every 2 years. These people don't have time to read all those bills, so they're going to set up what's called a committee system, okay? And so don't worry about that top part. But the committee system here, you have what are called authorizing committees or appropriations committees. So anytime you hear appropriations, you should think money, funding, okay? There's one of these in each house. All the other authorizing committees are standing committees, okay? These are permanent committees. There's 19 in the House, 17 in the Senate. I've got a slide on the next slide over here that shows you these committees, okay? So 19 in the House, 17 in the Senate, okay? So with these guys, you can look up which committees, members are on and so forth. I actually have it right here. This is in my government honors book here. These are the 4 representatives from Kansas. Ours is Ron Estes. And Ron Estes is on the House Ways and Means Committee. Ways and Means to pay for things. They're dealing with taxes. So he's on that standing committee. And then our 2 senators, Jerry Moran and Pat Roberts, are in the Senate because there's only 100. They have to serve on multiple committees. So Pat Roberts is on the Joint Committee for Library, Joint Committee on Printing, Select Committee on Ethics, Agriculture, of course, he's from Kansas. Moran's on Appropriations, which is, that funding, which is a very important committee. He's on Commerce, Science, Transportation, which is big for the aircraft industry, Environment, Public Works, and Veterans Affairs and Indian Affairs. So he's on quite a few committees. As we move through that, so like if a bill on farming comes through, obviously it makes sense for it to go to the Agriculture Committee. It doesn't have to, but I'll tell you this, the leaders, the majority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, and Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, in the House, they get to choose which committees those go to, okay? And that's going to play a huge role in how a bill becomes a law, and I'll talk more about that later. So, again, just looking over some of these committees, at the top there, Agriculture, Appropriations, those are both very funding, okay? Armed Services, both have that, Budget, Bank, so they're a little bit different in each house. And there's the Ways and Means down there, okay? I'm telling you, if I was in the House, they have one on Homeland Security, I'd want to be on that. International Relations, I'd want to be on that. And then they have a House Select Committee on Intelligence, which something I'd like to be on. In the Senate, you have here Homeland Security, Government Affairs, Armed Services Committee. Those are important. Okay, well, they're all important. So committee members ask to be on certain committees. Maybe they're an expert in a certain area. But again, it's the leaders. So Nancy Pelosi, if you're a Democrat in the House, guess what? She gets to choose what committee you're on. And if you're not being a good little boy or girl and doing the things she wants you to do, you're not going to get on these committees you want to get on. Okay? Same thing in the Senate. If you're Republican, Mitch McConnell decides which committee you sit on. Now, since the Republicans are the minority in the Senate, or Democrats are minority in the Senate, there's a guy named, if I go back to this slide, okay, so the most powerful Democrat in the Senate is Chuck Schumer. The most powerful Republican in the House is Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader. They get to choose what committees their members are on, if that makes sense, okay? So, moving on, so you've got, these are the permanent committees. I'll be talking about joint committees here in a minute, okay? Okay, now this is important. So you have standing committees, and underneath all these standing committees, they have subcommittees. So some of these committees, like Agriculture, may have 2 or 3 or 4 subcommittees. So on Agriculture, you could have a subcommittee on imports and exports of agricultural goods. You could have one on food stamps. The Department of Agriculture does food stamps, school lunches. You may have a committee on that. Pesticides, insecticides. Okay, you may, on the Armed Services Committee, you may have subcommittees on the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and so forth, if that makes sense, okay? So these subcommittees are smaller, more specialized. So you have to be on several of these if you're in Congress, and this is where members of Congress really start to become experts in certain areas of legislation, okay? Now, one thing we talk about with the committees, every committee, okay, in the House is chaired, the chairperson, okay, is chaired by a Democrat. Every committee in the Senate is chaired by a Republican. The majority party always has more members on these committees, okay? So if you were watching the impeachment stuff, okay, that was happening in the House. That's where impeachment takes place. And it began in the Adam Schiff's Judiciary Committee right here, okay? And the Democrats had more members on that committee than Republicans. It's supposed to be proportional to how big the majorities are in the whole, okay? So if we go back to the slide once again, Democrats have 235 to 197. So on a committee of, say, 21 members, you may have, 13 Democrats and 8 Republicans, if that makes sense. Here, where it's 53-47, you may just have one more Republican than a Democrat, if that makes sense. Okay, so these committees get in very specialized. Joint committees, are made up of both the House and the Senate joining together. Okay, they study, advise Congress in key areas. This is more efficient because both houses are working together. These joint committees are usually more clerical, not as political. So like the Library of Congress, printing, these sorts of things that are not that political. Okay, and then a conference committee. Okay, I was doing this with my honors class earlier. Okay, so we have the $2.2 trillion budget, right? So let's say the House under Nancy Pelosi proposes $2.8 trillion. They pass that. Then it goes over to the Senate. Now remember, because they're spending our money, it has to start in the House. Okay? Excuse me. And then in the Senate, they decide that they only want to spend $1.6 trillion. Okay? And then they pass that bill. Well, what do you send the president? Well, that's why we have conference committees. Okay? So the same members, so this would be, members that the committees that heard these originally will come down here to the conference committee, and they will do what? Compromise. Okay? And so what's a good compromise? $2.2 trillion. Now, the conference committee can't send that to the president. Okay? It's got to go back to the House, back to the Senate, and then if the exact same bill passes both houses, it goes to the president. Okay? So that is part of how a bill becomes a law, this conference committee. So they're temporary bodies appointed to work out a compromise between two versions of the same bill. Now, a little bit later on in this, guys, I'm going to walk you through how Obamacare became law. It's really interesting study in how, one of the biggest bills in American history became law. And so it's a good example to use with lots of points I can talk about. Okay, so we're still talking about committees. And I'm going to go to the next slide. And so the committee assignments, okay, the committee chairs, as I was talking about, hold a great deal of power. It's always chaired by the majority. Okay, so all the chairs of the committees in the Senate are Republican. All the chairs in the House are Democrats. Okay. Traditionally selected by the person that's been on the committee the longest of the majority party. But since then, since the 70s, they've kind of had elections for some of the more important committees and ones that lots of members want to be on. Okay, so that's just how the committees are set up. Okay, so again, as I was saying earlier, in order to be on a committee, the leadership, okay, you have to apply to Nancy or Mitch McConnell or the other leaders, the minority leaders, to be on the committees you want. So more popular committees have elections. Some members choose committees that will help them affect their district, like agriculture for Kansas, okay, transportation for the aircraft industry here, depending on what part of the country you're in. So that's kind of a important part of that. And some are chosen so they can affect broader policy. Okay, so especially like foreign affairs and that sort of thing. Those are the areas that I'm most interested in. People like Mike Pompeo, who is now the Secretary of State, served on some of those international affairs and military committees. Okay, all right. So next slide. Looking at these committees still. Okay, they all have, these committees have personal staff. Okay, for the first 100 years, only committee chairs had staffs. Now, the staffs themselves, the members themselves have staffs. Now, these are professional jobs. These are careers, okay? Now, early on, they had pages and messengers. By 1897, they started hiring their own staffs. So some of these people are actually members of Congress, and then some of these people are staff members that help out. What do the staff do? Okay, they suggest policies. They actually write the bills. Members of Congress, you don't see them sitting in their office drawing up these bills on their own. It just doesn't happen. Okay, so they have very smart, talented people working for them. They negotiate with other staffs of other members to work out language and compromise and debate and so forth. If there's hearings, like during the impeachment hearings, the staff members will help write questions that the members of Congress can ask, okay? And so if you're a top staffer for like Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell, well, you tend to have some power. So if you show up, you're a top staffer for Pelosi, and you show up in another member's office, they're going to pay attention to what you're saying because you work for the man, okay? Or in that case, the woman. All right. So, yeah, it's something that if you go to college, you're an expert in something. These are job openings that come open. Some of these staffers are political. Some of them are like, if you're an expert on agriculture, you can advise the committee on good agricultural practices and poor agricultural practices because you're an expert, and they're not. Okay. All right, a little bit more with the committees. I think this is our last slide for the day. Okay. So committee staff are on the payroll of the committee. They hire, typically members hire one or more to work on committee projects. This is a specialized staffer, like I was just saying, with agriculture or other areas, transportation, so forth. Now, congressional agencies. This is kind of, these are to help Congress to carry out their work, okay? So Library of Congress, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Research facilities, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been there. It's pretty cool. I know some of you have seen the movie National Treasure 2, and they go in the Library of Congress, maybe in one or two, I don't know. CBO, Congressional Budget Office. So if a member of Congress wants to pass a tax cut or a tax increase, they can give those numbers to the Congressional Budget Office, and they'll run the numbers and tell you what the impact of that tax cut would be. Okay. The GAO, the General Accounting Office, watches over spending of funds appropriated. I have a neighbor just a couple doors over a few years ago, and it's been about 10 now. He graduated from Wichita State with a degree in, I think it was international business, and went to work for the General Accounting Office. He lives in Chicago now. He's been working there for a long time. This has been around since the Harding administration. Okay, General Printing Office prints publications. This is in Parkersburg, West Virginia, where my in-laws used to live. Robert Byrd, who I showed you a picture of a few slides ago from West Virginia. There's old Robert Byrd right there. He brought the government printing office to Parkersburg, created a lot of jobs for his home state. Okay. And then this next slide, I just have some pictures of the Library of Congress, which is really kind of cool. It's a really neat building if you ever get a chance to go in there. Okay. All right, guys, so I'm at like 18 minutes. I'm going to shut it down here. I'm going to put up the assignment for two questions. Those won't be due until Thursday at 3:30. I'm going to post a link for the movie, okay? And I really want you guys to watch that, okay? I may come up with an assignment for that, just easy, okay? And I'll make it optional. I can't force you guys to watch a movie. But I really hope you will take the time. What do we have on our hands? We have time. I'm bored to frickin' death. I know you guys are too. Some of you are working. Again, hope your families are well. Keep shooting those questions, and don't be afraid to post in the little message board there and say hello, or tell me how you're feeling about this class and how it's going and so forth. All right, guys, take care. We'll talk to you soon.